We have the olive oil nice and hot. To the olive oil, quite a bit of red pepper flakes because I like my lentils spicy. If you don't like them spicy, don't add it. The next thing that we do while the oil is getting nice and hot, we add some garlic. As always, you notice that I've added the garlic cut thick. Why? You should always ask why. You know, if you always ask why, you understand why things work and what is the sequence of events that brings the flavors that you're seeking. The reason why I like the garlic to pick it up at this point is because the next addition that I'm going to make is going to be the addition of il soffritto. Say that without laughing. What is soffritto? Soffritto is the Italian word for mirepoix. What is mirepoix? Mirepoix is nothing more than chopped onion, chopped celery, and chopped carrots. The three of them, the triumvirate, that's why we call it in Italian il triumvirato dei sapori, the triumvirate of the flavors, is considered to be at the base of just about any relevant sauce and or soup for that matter. Even in the making of lenticchie, you must have it. So here we go, already chopped it up ahead of time, and we're going to add a little bit of what I have right in here. As you can see, I've also left some of the leaves from the celery. This is something that I like. I think that yes, the celery brings a lot of flavor to it, but if you're lucky enough and you get a whole celery with the leaves attached, in addition to the stalk itself that you'll cut very, very fine, also add the leaves. They open up with a wonderful flavor of their own. Now, when it comes to lentils, you have many, many type of lentils that you can choose from, and many colors of them, and all of them have a personality of their own. So don't think that just because they're called lentil, the flavor is the same. Now, what I like about lentils is that they have a strong flavor of their own, but they play nice with just about every ingredient that you throw into. In this case, however, I want to maintain this recipe a vegetarian recipe, so we'll keep it nice and relaxed, in spite of the fact that I'm going to be using chicken stock. But if you're going to make it at home and you really want to be vegetarian 100%, go ahead and instead use vegetable stock. You can also use water if you want to, but it will not have as much flavor. So here are the lentils. We're going to add them into our pan, and we're going to saute it together with our mirepoix. The reason why I saute them is because I feel that when the lentils toast just a little bit, they open up with a great flavor. You notice that I've added no salt and no pepper. One of the reasons why I want to do that is because the lentils, they suck up flavors immediately. If you make a mistake and you were to add too much pepper or too much salt at this point, it's something that you cannot take out. So what I like to do is to cook the lentils all the way through, and then at the end taste it for flavor and adjust it according to the salt amount or to the pepper amount that I like. The lentils are nice and brown to this point, so what we need to do now is to add the stock. Rule of thumb, always add twice the amount of stock versus lentil, meaning if you add a cup of lentil, 2 cups of stock. Bring this to a boil, and once it reaches a boil, we're going to let it simmer until the lentils cook all the way through. In the process, several things is going to happen. The lentils are going to expand a little bit in size, but also they're going to soften up. But they're going to maintain this wonderful individual bit of flavor of their own. You know, at the end of the year, on December 31st, is typical for us Italians to eat lentil on New Year's Eve. People say, why? Because lentil has the symbolism of money attached to it. And the idea is that if you do eat lentils on the last day of the year, your next year will become with the promise of much money coming your way. So here's a recipe that maybe you could make for your family on December 31st of this year. The lentils are cooked perfect. As you can see, they're doubled up in size, and if you look at it, they almost do look like coins. Therefore, the Italian legend is almost true. It's perfect. Now, we're ready to plate. Lentils, known as the poor men caviar. Well, if being poor means that you get caviar like this, it's worth it. What I love about it is that these lentils have picked up all the flavors that we have added to it through the onions, the carrot, the celery. And they really are right now exploding with expectations. And this is how you make lenticchie brasate. Unbeknownst to me, when my father finally retired and he had this wonderful little condo overlooking the town of Mondello, which is right by the sea near Palermo. There was this large extension of space that he had in front of him that was basically left abandoned. My father managed to fill it with dirt and to plant a garden. Cavoli arriminati. What does that mean? That's Sicilian, by the way. It's Sicilian dialect. Cavoli in Sicilian is used for the word cavolfiore, which is the Italian word for cauliflower. Arriminati, also part of the Sicilian dialect, means mixed up. What's so unique about this treatment that we do into these cauliflower florets that makes them interesting? Well, first and foremost, it's my recipe. Second, it's a Sicilian recipe. Third, it's a wonderful rendition with something as bothersome, in my opinion, as a cauliflower, which has no personal beauty of its own. Suddenly it's taken into a combination of ingredients together with a little bit of saffron, a little bit of pine nuts, raisins, tomato sauce, and explodes. And then there is this wonderful finish that we do with the vinegar and the sugar to give it a little bit of agrodolce onto it that elevates this recipe to something what you've never seen before. And yet, it's so simple to make. It takes almost no time at all. And by the time I'm done with you, everybody will know you as the magician that make cauliflowers sing. The oil is nice and hot. Extra virgin olive oil. To this, we add a little bit of garlic. I like to add it in nice thick pieces like this because we're going to be braising this over a long period of time. And we're also going to have chopped white onion to create the base upon which our cauliflowers will cook properly. Next thing that I like to do, because I'm Sicilian, because we like spice, is a little bit of red pepper flakes right there. And then a little bit of parsley, because I want it to cook right into the base and give us this wonderful beginning. Why is the base so important? A lot of people ask me, why do I spend so much time in the base? By the way, some specific instructions. When you do this at home, I want you to reduce the heat to medium and cook this until the onions are translucent and the garlic starts to pick up some color. Now this is pretty much gotten to where we want to go. The garlic is starting to brown. And we add now the cauliflower. But what are we done with these cauliflowers? What we're done with the cauliflower, we only using the florets. And with the florets, I have cut them. In some cases, they're quite big. So what I done, I cut them also in quarters. And I have parboiled them. These florets that you see here, in the dimension that they are, I only cook them for about 2 minutes. You want to harden up and to be able to pick up the nice browning from the heating that we do. This is a small portion that we make, and almost like a portion for 2 people. But one of the things that I want you to understand is that the complete cooking of all of this will take place after the other liquids are added to this, and the cauliflower will soften. So why am I cooking with such attention at this point? I want for the cauliflower to pick up a tiny bit of the browning and to also totally engage with all of the other flavors. At this point, the last thing that I do is a little bit of sea salt. And I encourage you with sea salt because it's the only thing that we use at my home in Sicily. Now watch these other ingredients I'm about to add because you're going to be shocked. I'm sure you've never seen this before. Pine nuts. And after the pine nuts, what we have in here are raisins. What we've done with these raisins is interesting. We have put them in hot water for about a half hour. We want to rehydrate the raisins. If you take them out of the package, you put them straight into the pan, what will happen to the raisins is they're too hard. This way they're soft, they release a lot more of the juices, and they combine with all the ingredients in a wonderful way. A handful should be enough, but knowing me, 2 handfuls is better. Imagine this in your head already, how the flavors are coming in together. But for this to cook perfectly, it has to braise. So what are the braising techniques that we're going to use? Where is the liquid? I prefer not to put any wine in this. Some recipes in other households, not mine, sometimes they add marsala. I prefer not to. What I like to add instead is chicken stock. If you do not want to use chicken stock, you want to make this exclusively vegetarian, your option would be water. I would prefer actually pasta water, or a vegetarian stock. That's another alternative that you can use. And then a little bit of tomato sauce. Now here comes the coup de grace, using a French word I just learned. Questo è il colpo forte, using an Italian word I grew up with. We're going to be add a little bit of saffron powder. Now, saffron powder is very, very fine. You could also use the pistils if you wanted to. The reason why we add it is just a tiny amount of flavor. It will give a certain yellow coloring, a hint of it to the cooking of it. The flavoring is very significant to the point that you will find a bit of a hint. If you go too strong with the saffron, it will take it from pleasant to unpleasant quite quickly. I would like to spend a moment to talk about the historical background of this dish. It is part of a Sicilian tradition and it has a lot of the elements that are typical of the town of Palermo. Pine nuts, raisins, cauliflower, but where do we get this idea? Where does it come from? For those of you that don't know, Sicily for the longest time, historically, was a harbor that hosted many civilizations. Arab, French, Roman. We were part of the Ottoman Empire for many centuries, and in that process, one of the things that was taught to us and became part of our integral cuisine was the adoption of these cooking techniques to this element of sweet, salty, sour that came into play in a most original way. The next addition that I'm about to make, as a matter of fact, is an extrapolation of that tradition. There is history in everything that we do in terms of food. There is a story behind why certain ingredients come together, and I find it fascinating on the few times that I had the opportunity to study it, to understand the action and reaction of things. Now, the next addition that we're going to make is unusual but very effective. First, we add a little bit of white wine vinegar, and then the same effect, what we want to do is to put sugar, and sugar almost in the same amount. The sweet and sour end that will come out of this is splendid, and it gives to all of this a wonderful, wonderful finish, and something that really teases the palate. There's one more addition that used to be made in the old day, and that is the addition of unsweetened cocoa powder. For this preparation, I propose not to do it, showing you exactly what it is, but when you make it at home, if you're in the mood to experience something new, cocoa powder is the way to go. Unsweetened cocoa powder. We're done. Let's turn off the heat, and now we're ready to plate. Plating this dish is a little bit of a trip down in my past, and maybe something that really doesn't deserve to be plated so elegantly. But to me, it's at the very base of who I am and where I come from. This is the kind of vegetarian dish that is going to solve a lot of problems for you at home. You have children that don't want to eat cauliflower, cook them this way. They'll keep asking you all the time. There's a couple of extra steps that I like to do at this point, one of which is to add Romano cheese. I think that Romano cheese is a wonderful addition to have. The saltiness of it combines wonderfully well with all the other ingredients. And then just for decoration, for no other reason, a little bit of green parsley. And there you are, signori e signori, mixed up cauliflower. Mixed up, it's the perfect definition of this dish and the way I feel inside my heart when I prepare it. It wasn't too long ago when I was organizing the garage and I ran into a bunch of photographs that he had taken, that he had sent me with great pride. At the time, I showed it was a modest amount of success here in the United States, but my father wanted me to see what he could do in that garden. And when I saw the garden, I realized for the first time the incredible truth of the ability of being able to dream something and to put it into action. He had cauliflowers the size of little Cinquecento. He had zucchini as tall as he was. There was flowers everywhere, and he had a smile on each one of these photographs. Pasta con le zucchine. My mother, Massimiliana, was and still is a very resourceful woman. I remember that one of the biggest challenges she had as she was raising me and my brother Mario was that we hated to eat veggies. So what Mom did, she figured out an interesting way to put veggies inside the sauce of pastas. Now, what I'm about to show you is my rendition of this dish. I have slightly changed it, but it's a wonderful combination of simple spices, garlic, mint, basil, parsley, and the zucchini, which cook together, stew to perfection, create a sauce that not only tastes fantastic, but it will be an excellent way to make sure that from now on, your children will love their veggies too, especially when poured on top of pasta. Let me show you how to make it. Olive oil. We have beautiful extra virgin olive oil, and we're gonna add a lot to the pan because the olive oil primarily is going to be for us the base of the sauce. As the olive oil starts to cook and gets nice and hot, we add some red pepper flakes just to get a nice beginning. Now, while this is taking place, you want to wait for the olive oil to get nice and hot. Let me tell you about why I'm so attached to this recipe. My dad, after he retired, finally had the garden of his dreams. He had a garden already in the home that I grew up in, but he was always so busy doing business and working that he really didn't get to tend to the garden. But when he retired, he had a small plot of land and he turned that into paradise on earth. I remember once receiving a photograph from him, and he had a zucca. The zucca is from the family of the zucchini, but it's the big brother of the zucchini. A big thing about this stall, he was standing proud next to it. I just remember seeing my dad in that photograph and really seeing him truly joyous. Now, what we have done, we have taken the zucchini, we have peeled it, and then we cut it in cubes. And we're gonna fry them in the olive oil. When you add the zucchini, you really want to fry them. And one of the things that you will notice is the zucchini pick up a flavor of their own immediately as soon as they start to brown. And it's a flavor as what you never had before. Several techniques on how to do this. Some people, in Sicily especially, they like to cut the zucchini exactly like this. Then they like to add the salt and to let them drain over a colander. What happens is the zucchini spit out the water. I don't mind the technique, but I find that it's overly salty in some cases, and later in life I've realized that I don't do too well with too much salt. The reason why I like the zucchini also full of juice and water is because in this process of frying, pretty soon, and once they start to brown, they will start to braise into the oil, releasing their own juices into it and creating this softness that at the end of it all is the sauce itself. Right now, for example, you can see the beautiful color that the zucchini are picking up. And this is, for me, a moment in which I pay great attention because in spite of the fact that we had the zucchini cooking and frying and stirring, if you don't pay attention, you might take them from brown to burn. So if you notice that the oil is too hot for you, just lower it down a little bit to accommodate your needs. They're picking up exactly the color that we want. At this point, you can see they're plumping up. This is what makes the zucchini incredible. Now we go with the infusion of flavors. First thing we do is a little bit of the salt all the way around. Also, I like to add a little bit of black pepper, coarsely ground. I like to see it and taste it. Now, this is the most important part. We have fresh basil, fresh parsley, and fresh mint. You cannot do it with dry herbs. This will not work. It has to be fresh. Still a lot of water in them, and as they fry together with the zucchini, they give us the flavor that we want. So here we go. The mint, a little bit of the basil, and now a little bit of the parsley. At this point, keep stirring exactly like this. And you can see them softening up. Too bad that we do not have the technology yet to transfer the aroma over the air, because this aroma as it stands right now is unbelievable. I can also call this ragù di zucchine. It makes it sound even better because in the concept of a ragù, which is a meat sauce, the meat pieces braise for quite some time with all of these ingredients and they bring out this flavor. But the true essence of the zucchini is in the little bit of burn that you see right here on the sides. The little bit of burn on the outside of the zucchini is the flavor enhancer that really pops out, and you have to try it to see exactly what I mean. At this point, we got as much as what we wanted. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the garlic. Unlike my garlic for each one of my recipes in the past, this time it's chopped. I want it to cook out right away, but what I do, I lower the heat down, and then I add the garlic. Uno, due, e tre. Why do I use a little spoon like this? I don't know. My dad used to do it that way, so once in a while, I don't know what happens to me. I go back and I do things not because I know what the reason for, but because it reminds me of the old days. The garlic is now cooking with the zucchini. This aroma that's coming out is fantastic. Now, let me show you another trick that most people don't know about. This sauce needs a little bit of liquid. More commonly, people would just simply go and grab some chicken stock. Instead, I think that the most important liquid to be had at this point is the water in which the pasta is cooking. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, here we go. A lot of people, when they see me do this for the first time, they say, "Nick, you're watering down the sauce." Hold on, hold on. The pasta water is full of starch. This is the starch that's being released by the pasta as the pasta cooks. This starch, as it's suspended mid-air within the context of the liquid of the water, has this ability of picking up, absorbing the flavor of whatever it goes into. Also, once the starch reaches a certain temperature, it expands. And as it expands, it still maintains, with the contest of liquidity that we have, the thickness, which is perfect for us to coat the pasta with. And this is why I love it so much. The sauce has now reached the perfect consistency. It's time for us to put the pasta into the sauce. One of the things that I like to do with every pasta that I make is to slightly undercook the pasta and finish the pasta inside the sauce. That is one of the reasons why you saw me adding a little bit of water to the sauce base that we had in here with the zucchini. My intent is to create a situation where the pasta and the sauce become one. Primarily, I would like for the liquid elements of the sauce to transfer inside the pasta, giving this pasta this burst of flavor. One of the things that you're noticing is that now that the zucchini have cooked to the perfect consistency, they're starting to break and creating a cream-like, and they're going straight into the sauce in this creamy form that I just cannot describe until you take your first bite. You will love this. At this point, we are ready to serve, but there are two very important steps that we need to do. First, turn off the heat. Why is that important? I'm about to add a very important ingredient now, and that is cheese. You can use any kind of cheese you want. My wife will not let me use Romano, which is my favorite. You can use Parmigiano, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm going to share this with her as soon as I'm done with you guys. The reason why I turn off the heat is because if you cook with cheese and you still have the heat underneath, unless you have some super pots and pans like I do, which are non-stick, with the heat coming from underneath, the cheese will go to the very bottom of the pan and it will stick, it will burn, also changing for the worse the flavor of what you have. Once you get to this point, you're pretty much done. You don't need anything else, unless you're a little boy like me. And a little boy like me likes a little bit of butter. La glasatura, the glazing that the butter gives, is, in my opinion, one final addition that kicks this recipe to the next level. Oh, yes. We're ready to serve this. Let me show you how to plate it to make it look beautiful. One of the greatest gifts I got from destiny, and the way in which I was favored, was that I was able to cook for my father. So when I plate a pasta like this, I'm always thinking in my head, what would I do if I was to give this to Vincenzo? His name was Vincenzo, but me and my brother, kiddingly, used to call him Vinny. He was the perfect Vinny. And my father always had something to say. Even the first few times that I cooked for him, as I was laying out the ingredients for him, he would always say, ah, you could have done this better, ah, you could have done that better. I remember once when I was able to make him this recipe, and he said, prossima volta che vieni giù a Palermo, which means the next time you come down to Palermo, you gotta teach me how to make it. So this pasta, in a certain way, for me, is very romantic. To me, pasta is paradise. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you make pasta with zucchini sauce, Sicilian style. My dad passed away some years ago, but to this date, when I want to remember him the way that I want to remember him, I like to look at his photographs, not only because he was a master at what he did in the garden. I hope that some of his DNA eventually got passed on to me, and while I've not found my gift yet in gardening, I would like to believe that one day I could make beautiful zucchinis like his, or cauliflowers, or artichokes. Yeah, I would like to be a gardener. Picciotti, picciotta, jamon in the cucina. This is Sicilian for ladies and gentlemen, come to the kitchen. Today we're going to make red wine sauce, an old classic made easy. Steak au poivre with scalloped potatoes and arugula, served with red wine sauce. Another great classic dish, salmon with sauteed Brussels sprouts and red wine sauce. And learn how my fondness for the art of plating is my wife's sacrifice. Come for the recipes. Stay for the story. The French call it mirepoix. As Italians, we call it soffritto. Plus, we look cuter because we move our hands like this. If you're an Italian, when you're born, you got a kind of a DNA that doesn't let you talk and not move the hands at the same time. You got to talk. You got to move like this. So a Frenchman will say mirepoix. An Italian guy will say it's soffritto. You see the way the hands move? That's the thing. That's the thing that makes us different. Ultimately, the ingredients are the same. Carrots, celery, and onion. The triumvirate, which is at the base of every sauce that's made by anyone. It's just, and this is my opinion, it sounds cuter in Italian. On the other hand, if you were to ask me again, even tastes better in Italian. Yeah, it does. One of the great trips that I took with my family when I was barely a teenager was going to France. It was very exciting for me. I wanted to eat. I wanted to try French food. I remember this one time, this fancy restaurant that my dad took me, my brother, and my mom. For the first time, I had steak with red wine sauce. It became my mission that I had to figure out how to make this sauce. And this sauce was a disastrous series of attempts that started as early as me at the age of 18, all the way into my early 30s until I developed the perfect understanding on how to make the most delicious red wine sauce. It is something that I love and adore, and it's something that you can make at home with very basic technique and as simple as 1, 2, 3. Let me show you how. Making a red wine sauce, it's like directing an orchestra in the making of a concert. What am I saying? Each one of the ingredients has a purpose. Each one of the ingredients has a role, and this role adds to the sauce in a specific fashion. Let's get started first with the pancetta. The reason why I like pancetta, you could use bacon if you don't have pancetta, is because I find that pork is something that brings an incredible turn for the best to the flavor of the sauce as a whole. I like to cook it and let it render. Don't worry about the excessive fat, because one of the things that we're going to do afterwards, once the sauce has cooked all the way through, I'm going to show you how to actually get the fat out of the sauce. You don't need to cook it too long. You have to wait enough so that it starts to brown a little bit, because the making of the sauce primarily is a long braise. Now we are at the point in which the next thing that we want to add is il soffritto. What is the soffritto? Very simple. We have onion, carrots, celery. You don't need to be too elegant in the way in which you cut it, as a matter of fact. At this point, you notice that I'm not adding any pepper and salt, because there's an enormous amount of that already into the pork that I've used, the pancetta in this case, heavily salted. All that I want to do right now is just to get them to sweat a little bit and to brown up. One of the things that I came to realize is the importance of caramelization. In this case, I'm not adding salt or pepper. This is just a touch of sugar that I want to add and make sure that it's coating each one of the ingredients in there, because the sugar right now fighting against the salt in the pork pretty soon will create the perfect combination of ingredients. But I'm not finished. There's another bit here that you're going to love. This is tomato paste. I find that used in this fashion blooms, opens up. It gives to the sauce a breath. It's like the sauce stands proud. It just discovers a whole new horizon to it. And I find this to be very important. Traditionally speaking, the herbs that you should add to this are bay leaves. I've done it with bay leaves and it tastes fantastic. But there is a little Stellinism that I like even more, and that is the addition of a little bit of rosemary. This is rosemary from my garden up front, a couple of pieces that I love to add in there, and just one more element, one more note. The only thing that I'm upset about is that this does not have smell-o-vision, because if you could only feel the aromas as they're opening up. The next thing that I like to do is to add garlic. In this case, I like to add whole pieces of garlic. Don't worry about it, because you're going to strain all these ingredients afterwards, so don't be concerned by it. Look at what a color there is there already. This is the base. This is what's going to let the sauce sing. to show you next is one more trick, and that's the addition of a little bit of flour. Why do we add the flour? We want the flour to cook so that the sauce will be thicker as the sauce cooks over a long period of time. And the next thing that we're going to do is, first and foremost, the addition of the red wine. What red wine? Burgundy would be great. Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Merlot. You choose the wine that you want. Ultimately, the wine that you choose will give the sauce a different flavor, but it will not make it bad. There's not only one wine that's great. The one thing that I would propose is don't use the best wine that you have, stuff that costs you $200-300 a bottle. Enjoy the wine and drink it. Use, average wine for this. And the next thing that I like to do is add chicken stock. Why? I'm going to use this particular wine sauce for several things. And I find that the chicken stock has this ability of playing nice with everybody. When you do this at home, you bring this to a boil. Once this reaches a boil, I want you to reduce it down to a simmer and let the sauce cook, simmering for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. The sauce has cooked perfectly for almost 2 hours. We have strained the sauce, and then we have moved the sauce to a degreasing cup. Why? Do you remember before when I told you I'm going to show you to get rid of the excessive oil? Here you can see the sauce right at the top in this lighter color. This is all the fat that has accumulated. You need this instrument at home in order to be able to take the grease off. Watch what happens. As I pour this into the pan, the sauce comes out holding back the fat. The fat is the yellowish lighter color on top. The sauce is not yet to sauce consistency. That's why we're going to bring this to a boil. Once it reaches a boil, anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes on simmer will give you the consistency that you're looking for. The sauce is reduced to the perfect consistency. I'm gonna turn it off, and now we're ready to plate. I don't believe in a time machine, but this sauce maybe is the closest thing that comes to a time machine. The fact that I was able on my own to repeat this performance that I saw as a child in this French restaurant in my first trip to France. This is more than a sauce. This is a realization of a dream. This is an aspiration. But this is how you make red wine sauce. One of the things that was always told to me is the food, it's good. You put it on the plate and the food speaks by itself. I remember as a 10-year-old having issues with my mother in the way she would plate the pasta. Telling her how the sauce should actually be placed in a certain fashion, how the plate that she chose was the wrong plate. I don't know what happened to me, why was it that I was so motivated, because my mom still to this very day, she cooks better than me, but the way in which the food always looked on the plate meant a great deal to me. When I think of making scalloped potatoes, I get excited because to me it's like making dessert. Basically, we have many layers of thinly cut potatoes that we separate with cheese. When we bake it, all this wonderful cheese and potatoes molding into one. But one of the most important things is to make sure that you grease the pan properly. So what we have in here is butter. You got to use your hands. There is not a tool that will work as good as your hands. And what I like to do is to spread it all over the pan so that the sides and the bottom of the pan are completely covered. Why do I do this? Even though this pan is a non-stick, for flavor, pure unadulterated flavor. This flavor right here that the butter gives to the potato is going to enhance them enormously. I cut these potatoes by hand with a knife. You can also use a mandolin, but if you do it with a mandolin, do me a favor, never be in a rush. When you're in a rush, that's when problems do occur. There is not a point for us to be overly taken by this, and especially since I cut these potatoes just about an hour ago, you notice that some of them are starting to turn. It will happen to you at home. Is this a problem? Not at all. Once they cook, they completely collapse. The one thing that I find important is the selection of the cheeses. What you will find today is that the basic cheeses that I use are part of the traditional way of doing it, which is the Swiss cheese, Gruyere, and Parmigiano. So here we have some Swiss cheese that I've already put together and chopped up by hand. We're going to sprinkle it right on top like this, and then you go with Parmigiano. And when you go with Parmigiano, you just use it. Then what I do at this point always is a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. The next thing that we're going to do is we create another layer. Right here it is. Here we go with this right on top of it. So here we go again with another big, abundant addition of my Gruyere. By the way, Gruyere is nothing more than another name for Swiss cheese. It tends to be a little bit sharper, and I like the Gruyere in the family of Swiss cheeses for the very reason. This is the top now. This is the one that you want to put all the extra cheese that you can, just like this. Remember, these potatoes, as they cook, they will fall on top of each other. And now we go again here with Parmigiano, molto Parmigiano. Now, the last addition that we're going to make is very important. What we have in here is half and half. I've done this with milk only. I've done it with cream only. I find that half and half, which is basically a mixture, equal mixture of milk and cream, gives me the perfect rendition. So you add it, and how much do you add? Depending on the pan that you use, you want to bring it at least 3/4 of the way up. There we are. This is the perfect amount that we have for this particular pan. The oven right now is preheated at 375 degrees. Sometimes I even preheat it to 400 degrees because you lose some heat once you open the oven. So the scalloped potatoes are ready and the oven is preheated. And now I'm going to place them into the oven. Baby, it's out of the oven. It's very hot. You will notice it's cooked all the way around. Now, most people like to dive right into it. Don't do that. What I propose that you do is that you let it rest, let it get to room temperature, then put it into the refrigerator and let it rest overnight. Why? My opinion is that the flavors get even better. But what is the added advantage of letting it rest overnight? Let me show you. Take a look at this pan. Here are 2 pieces that I cut in perfect square. It makes it ideal when you want to serve it to your friends to basically cut it into whatever shape you want. And then using a pan, you can put it in the oven to reheat it. You don't need any more than, I would say, 350, 375, between 10 and 15 minutes at the most, depending on the size of the piece. And this is how you make scalloped potatoes. The steak that we're using in this particular dish is a filet mignon. Now, when it comes on spicing the steak, you can do pretty much anything you want. Salt, pepper, onion, paprika, you know, whatever drives you, whatever you feel like painting, go your way. What I've done with this steak, I've done what's commonly known as mcuh. Basically, taking peppercorns, I crush them, and then I roll the steak until it's completely coated with it. So here we go. The important thing that you must do when cooking a steak, in a pan especially, is do not move it. When you take a look at a steak like this, the first thing that you want to have in your mind to kind of make an evaluation of how long it will take to take it where you want it to go is, how do you like your steak? Some people go, I like it medium rare, medium done, medium well, I like it well done. Well, some people like it well done. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the way it happens. But no matter how you like to have it, one of the things that you need to ensure is that the steak is perfectly cooked on each side. I see often young chefs moving the steaks back and forth, back and forth. For the first 4 minutes at least, the steak has to sit in one position untouched. How long does it take for the steak to cook? A steak like this, we have at about an inch thick. I would say 4 minutes per side might take you to your medium rare. The steak is cooked perfectly on one side. We need to turn it to the other side. But I want to show you something. I want to tell you the reason why. I like to put a spatula underneath the steak, and as I turn the steak, it gives me complete control. More often than not, people simply flip it this way. What happens? If there's still a little bit of water in there, it's going to splash back. This allows you to avoid the splash back. But trust me when I tell you, it does help. It is at this point that I like to do something unique. Well, not so unique. It is the process known as arrosé. And I like to do it because it really gives us an additional layer of flavor that you haven't seen before. So a softened piece of butter is added to the hot oil. And then we're going to use this butter to braise the steak with. And here we go. Why do we do this? Is the butter really needed? Well, I find that every time I use this technique, the steak, for me, almost has a sweeter flavor, and I can taste the butter in just about every bite that I take. In this particular steak, because of the aggressiveness of the peppercorn, which we used as a coating on the outside of the steak, one of the things I want to do is add something that softens the flow of all the flavors attacking. Remember, we're going to have this with a wonderful bit of arugula and also with the red wine sauce. This is something that allows me truly to combine all the flavors together as if colors within the context of a painting. We now have cooked the steak exactly to where I wanted to have it. But before we can serve it, we need to let it rest. The amount of time that you need to let this rest for is 5 minutes. So while the steak is resting, let me show you how to make the arugula. Cooking arugula is very, very simple, but you need to think where you want to take it and why. Arugula by itself already has a fairly intense flavor. It's very peppery, very salty, just naturally in the way in which it is. Doesn't need too much help. But what I'm about to show you is one thing that, in my opinion, makes it easy to cook it and at the same time imparts a great deal of flavor. It starts always with a little bit of red pepper flakes. So here we go. In the oil, we're now going to add the garlic. The oil is nice and hot. The garlic is chopped, as you can see, and you always see me adding big pieces of garlic, but not this time. This time I want this garlic to infuse the oil. As soon as the garlic starts to brown, immediately I lower it down to simmer and I add the arugula right in it. And then you stir like this. Let the arugula cook in that. What's happening is the arugula is bringing down the temperature. It's wilting into it. And it's becoming exactly what we love it. All the flavors are coming out together. This is fantastic. It's wonderful. I love it. And there we are. The arugula is perfectly sauteed. It's exactly what I love. Every bite that you will take of this will have all the flavors that you did not expect. And the garlic really is going to be a fantastic addition. Turn off the heat. The arugula is ready. The meat is ready. The red wine sauce is ready. We're ready to plate. Let me show you how. Plating to some is simply placing the ingredients on the plate. Treat it as if it was an exercise in painting. Think of yourself as Caravaggio, as if you're painting the perfect chiaroscuro, where every element within the painting has a personality of its own. These dishes that you have cooked with so much care and so much love at this point become alive. Your passion seeps through with every bite that will be taken. And as people will sit around the table, drinking their wine, smiling, telling the story, taking the bites of your food, you will know you made it happen. And here it is. That's how you make steak au poivre with red wine sauce, sauté arugula with garlic, and scalloped potatoes. I would like to say that I had aspirations of becoming the Caravaggio of plating, being able to place all the pieces of a dish, of a recipe in the dish in such a form that would be so simple they would look almost as if it just happened, and yet so involved, where the process of the simplicity was a great deal of thinking for height, width, color. My wife is highly bothered by that because I still do it to this very day, and in spite of the fact that it's just the two of us, it takes me forever to plate. In the early 80s, one dish that became very, very popular here in the United States was salmon with red wine sauce. More often than not, it was served in French restaurants, which at the time I used to go a great deal to. But every time I would actually have it, I would say, I have an idea on how to make it better. I have an idea on how to make it better. Until my wife said to me, look, if you think you're so much better, why don't you learn how to do it? She should not have said that. It took a long time for me to eventually master this dish, but I'm going to share with you how to make this unique dish that actually puts together fish and red wine. Let me show you. First, we got to make the Brussels sprouts. In the pan, we already have some olive oil, which is nice and hot. Sicilian style, always add red pepper flakes just because I like it to get nice and hot and spicy. And then we add our bacon. You can use any kind of bacon you want. I find that artisanal bacon, it's always the best. It has more flavor, it has a better personality, and it really tells the story. The kind of story that ultimately allows you, when this dish is completed, to have all these different elements of flavor. Every ingredient that you can upgrade, it's like elevating the tone in which you tell your story. And when I cook it until they just start to brown, and the reason why I cut it like this is to give it a look of lardons, which is a French name for this particular cut of bacon. The Brussels sprouts, we have treated slightly different. We have sliced them thin. Why are we doing that? Well, Brussels sprouts pretty resilient. It's one of those veggies that has a personality and a strength of its own. We really need to break it down. I'm gonna increase it to high heat. At this point, another addition that I like to make, just to give it another element of flavor, is a little bit of chopped garlic, bean chopped. If we add it at the beginning, it would have burned. Instead, by adding it at the end, after all the ingredients have gone, it will give its flavor, it will infuse it, but it will not be overtaking the dish. You also notice that I'm cooking this in a saucepan, unusual for this particular type of thing. The reason why is because I love stirring about, I love interacting with the dish, and also this prevents for the Brussels sprouts during this process to jump outside of the pan. I find this to be very, very helpful to me. At this point, as you can see, they're softened up quite a bit, and I add a little bit of chicken stock now. Perfect. This needs a few more minutes to cook and complete, so why don't we do this? I'm gonna put this aside, and while the Brussels sprouts are cooking, I'm gonna show you how to make the salmon. So what we're going to do, we're gonna cook the salmon on medium heat, but I have preheated the pan to high heat. I just reduced down the heat because I want the first contact to give it a nice sear. All that I've done with the salmon is just salt and pepper. I personally find that you can still get a nice little bit of browning on the outside, but by cooking it longer on a lower heat, you maintain the juiciness of the fish. And that, to me, is the most important thing. Now we're ready to turn it to the other side. Ah, beautiful. This is exactly the browning I was looking for. Now, here comes the magic. And this magic is a technique that the French chef called arroser. So in spite of the fact that we have olive oil in there, we do add now a little piece of butter. We let the butter melt into the pan. So I tilt the pan toward me and I bathe it. Look at that. Look at that. Mamma mia, che bellezza. Guarda. Now, I get passionate about this because I know that this butter is now penetrating all the way through into the salmon. As you can see right in here on the split that has taken place, the butter is going straight into every fiber of it. And the way the salmon will taste once I serve it to you, it will be something that you never had before. Look at the perfect crust up at the top and the tenderness that still is. Oh, mamma mia. To have a figure in mind when you cook the salmon, always keep in mind this. A salmon like this, of this side, a piece of this shape, will take about 3 minutes per side to cook perfect. Once you cook the salmon exactly 3 minutes per side, turn off the heat. Now, there's one more thing that I need to do with the Brussels sprouts, and then we're ready to plate it. All right. The Brussels sprouts are perfectly done. As you can see, all the chicken stock that was left in there has evaporated. That's why we added just a little bit. And now you can see how nice and soft we are. The last bit of addition is a little bit of butter, just to increase a little bit more of the flavor to it. If you wanted to, at this point, you could even use and add a little bit of Parmesan cheese. It will go wonderful, even with this recipe. The Brussels sprout is perfect. The fish is perfect. We have the red wine sauce ready to go. Ready to plate. Let me show you. And when it finally comes to plating, think of yourself as a painter. Think of yourself as an artist who is deploying, demonstrating the beauty of the art that is just created within the assembly of each one of the ingredients on the plate in a way that is enchanting. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the simple ones. And I hope that this dish that came from my heart, from my soul, from my mind, from my passion, will inspire you to turn your kitchen into your favorite restaurant. And this is how you make salmon with Brussels sprouts and bacon and red wine sauce. My wife says, I like you better when you just started out. I says, why? I'm better now. I say, yeah, the flavors are better. But the food always comes out cold. It takes you forever for you to do the plating. What do you do then? And I say, honey, I'm sacrificing myself and you for our art. If I'm gonna do a TV show about cooking, you gotta know what it looks great. And if the payoff is that you gotta eat it lukewarm, so be it. I don't think she's forgiven me yet. No, I don't think she has. Emotion, then life would have been perfect. I must say that after many years of working on TV, I can actually edit myself on call to the most minimalistic sound that could be imperviously disturbing within the context of an interview such as this. And I find inside of me this genius that goes untapped. I deserve more than just an Emmy. I think an Oscar should be in the doable. My wife always asks me, why are you always smiling? And I say to her, because I'm cooking today. Today, I'm gonna show you how to make pasta alla norma, how to marry fried eggplant and smoked mozzarella, of course. Rollatini di melanzane, filled with ricotta cheese and covered with picchio pacchio sauce. And ricotta pudding, my interpretation of one of my childhood favorites. And find out why I love cheese. Yes, it's got something to do with the taste, but a lot of it, it's in the heart. Come for the recipes. Stay for the story. I love cheese. I love all kinds of cheese. I love Italian cheese, French cheese. The more, the merrier. I love them all. A real chef should say that cheese, a specific kind, a type that is made certain times of the year in certain fashion, flavors. To me, when I think of cheese, it's the memories that I associate with cheese. Pasta alla norma, a Sicilian specialty that requires the making of fried eggplant. Very simple. Let me show you how to make it. We're about to deep fry the eggplant using extra light olive oil, super hot, and using a skimmer, I insert it this way. This does several things for me. It allows me to control the drop of the eggplant without any splashback. This is very important. This oil, if not managed properly, it could splash back and cause serious problems. This way instead, it goes straight in it. Why are we doing it this way? That's the one thing you should ask me. Why don't we just saute it? It's so much easier. One of the big problems that eggplant does have is that it absorbs an enormous amount of oil. It's like a sponge. So when you deep fry like this, you achieve several goals. The number one goal is that as soon as the eggplant cube hits the olive oil, it gets seared. So all the juices are trapped on the inside, and it prevents for any oil to be sucked into the eggplant. It makes this eggplant still, deep fried and dealt with oil, but it's much, much lighter than when you saute it in the olive oil using a saute pan, because at that point, what you will notice is that the eggplant can actually absorb a time and a half its volume, and that could be very, very greasy. Now, let's pay attention and see what happens here. We got the perfect color, so let me take this out of here. I'm loving using this tool. Perfetto, perfetto, perfect. Before we continue with the rest of the recipe, there's another addition. While the eggplant is super hot like this, I like to add some extra flavor. So we go with some chopped, fresh mint. Why mint? Mint is a Sicilian spice, and we put it everywhere if we can. And in this case, it's perfect. And the next thing that we're going to do is Romano cheese, right on top of it. Why? This is super hot, so the cheese and the mint are going to coat the outside of the eggplant. So when we use this inside the sauce, every piece of eggplant will have a flavor of its own. Now we're done with this. Next, I'm going to show you how to make the sauce. Now we got extra virgin olive oil in the pan. While the olive oil is getting nice and hot, let's add some red pepper flakes. As usual, I like to have it a little bit spicy. More often than not, this is the way in which we do it in Western Sicily. Eastern Sicily, they're a little bit more smooth and calm with the flavors, but in Palermo, adventurous people. Yes, what can I say? The next thing that we're going to do, garlic. The garlic is nice and thick, and we're gonna cook it here in the olive oil. Now, the reason why I like to use extra virgin olive oil is because the olive oil is one of the significant ingredients inside the sauce. And what it does for us, it brings out its natural flavor. So you'll find that olive oils from Sicily are completely different from olive oils that instead come from Tuscany or from France or from Spain. I think that the Sicilian olive oils are fantastic, but you be the judge of what is the flavor that you like the most, because ultimately it will be in your sauce. While the garlic is getting nice and brown, we're gonna add some onions. White onions is what I chose to go with this time. And we sprinkle this around just like that. Lower the heat a little bit. This is the base that I want to have before I give all the other building steps that will come next. The next thing that I want to do is to add a little bit of wine, white wine. Just enough for un profumino. Un profumino in Italian means a little aroma. You just want to give it something that, just a splash of it that almost caresses the ingredients without overtaking them. Because on top of this, we're going to build the sauce with other ingredients that already have flavors of their own. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to add tomato sauce. And together with the tomato sauce, a little bit of chicken stock. If you're making this and you want to maintain it a complete vegetarian, you can go with just the water from the pasta, or you can go for some vegetable stock instead. Perfect. Now stir it about and let the sauce come together. As soon as the sauce comes together, and will take about, I would say, we're going to bring it to a quick boil. Once it reaches a boil, I'm going to let it simmer for about 8 minutes or so. All the flavors will come together. We don't need any more than 8 minutes because the tomato sauce, in this case, a plain marinara, already has a full flavor of its own. The chicken stock has a full flavor of its own. All that I wanted to do was to build up some of the other flavors with the other ingredients that we added. So let's just let it rest for a moment or so. The sauce has gotten the consistency we want. The pasta is ready to go. One small addition that I like to make at this point is to add a little bit of the eggplant that we already fried, just to add it to give the flavor of eggplant to the sauce. I want to save a little bit more that I will use just for topping, for looks. Mamma mia, che bellezza. All right, at this point, we're ready to go. Now, I've cooked the pasta al dente, which means the pasta is not cooked all the way through. Al dente is an Italian definition of the pasta, which translated loosely means to the bite. Instead, if I could explain to you what al dente means, al dente is an Italian way in which we turn the pasta into a steak. How can we do this? Pasta, of all things, was one of the least expensive foods that people could buy at the store. By cooking it al dente, you have to bite into the pasta. And by biting into the pasta, you almost have this impression that the pasta itself is a solid piece of protein. But there's another reason why we have the pasta now cooking into the sauce. You see already the sauce decreasing in volume as it cooks into the pasta. Why is this taking place? In this case, the pasta has ridges on them, as you can see right here. The other part is that this sauce is getting trapped inside the pasta itself and penetrating the pasta layer by layer by layer. This is the definition of a professional rendition of pasta. And you can see when the pasta arrives to be completely enveloped, surrounded, and every bite that you take, the pasta and the sauce itself go as one. Now, I am ready for my secret weapon. What is that weapon? Well, let me turn off the sauce so I can talk to you about this. We're going to add a very unique cheese. Let me add it right now. This cheese is called scamorza. In other words, scamorza is smoked mozzarella. Smoked mozzarella is the typical cheese that is associated with this particular kind of pasta. It has a very smoky taste to it, and it does not have the softness that you're accustomed to get from fresh mozzarella. Rather, it's a little bit harder, but the flavor that it has is astonishing, astonishing. So we're done with the pasta, and now we're ready to plate. Let me show you how to do that. The plating of pasta is, for me, to say the very least, a religious experience. Not just pasta alla norma, which I'm serving you right now, but any kind of pasta. Because I think of all the dishes that I know how to make, pasta is the one that I connect with the most. The cheese, the mozzarella that is melted into, now is making what is known il filo, string. This is the signature of the look of pasta alla norma. Before I serve it, I like to do two things. I like to add the extra bit of eggplant that I saved, and then there is one last addition, and that is the addition of Romano cheese, which in my opinion completely brings this to the next level. This is not just a pasta from my youth, this is pasta alla norma. Pasta done according to the rules. And this is how you make pasta alla norma. Specifically, this one memory that I have of my wife coming to Sicily, visiting with me and my family, my father arranging this special moment of taking us to a farmer to show us how ricotta was made fresh. This farmer that was dressed in a pink shirt of all things and perfectly pressed pants managed to actually milk the animal, place the milk into the cold room, thicken it, make the ricotta live in front of us, and then move it into the basket, which she placed to hang so that the ricotta would dry.